Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode. In this one we are going to be covering how to make a debuff and damage component that would manage all of like elemental damage, all stuns and slows and stuff like that. So we're just going to jump right into it and start up by creating all of the components we need. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder here, and this one's going to be called components. In here we're going to add a new blueprint class of actor component. This is going to be called BP_debuff component. And then we're going to go back to the blueprints folder. We're going to go to our interface folder and create a new blueprint interface. This one's going to be called BPI debuff interface. Next, we're going to go into the enums and we're going to create a new blueprint enum. It's going to be called E_damage type. And then lastly, we're going to go back to our blueprints folder and create a new folder again, and this one's going to be called UI. And in here, we're going to create a user interface, and then it's going to be called BPUI_health bar. And this one's probably the easiest, so we'll get started with the health bar. We currently have a canvas panel here, so all we're going to do is we're going to add a progress bar. And I'm going to change the anchor so it fills the entire screen. You can see we've got the four corners here now, and then you just change these offsets to all 0 and it should fill up the entire screen. And then we can set our percentage to 0.5, which would be half, since it's 0 to 1. And then we're going to change the color so we can see what this will look like when it's full, and maybe change the background to like a darker gray, and maybe lower the alpha just a little bit so it's a little transparent. Cool, and then we can go over to our graph and we can create a new function called custom event called update health bar. And it'll need a new parameter of a float type, and this will be called new percent, or just new percent. So to finish this up, all we need to do is drag in our progress bar that we created. We're going to do set percent, and we're just going to plug in that new percent. Perfect. So we can close out of that, and then we go back and we'll create the interface functions. So we're going to need one called apply special damage, and then there's going to be another one called apply slow, and then another one called apply stun. And then for all of these, we're going to need to add some variables here. So on input, we'll have a new type of float. This will be called damage amount. And then we'll have another one, and this will be the enum that we created. So it'll be _damage type. And this will be called damage type. And then on slow, we're going to need a slow percent float and a duration. Slow percent and duration. And then stun will only need duration. Perfect. So compile save, we can close out of that, and then go back to our enums and then create the damage type. And for now we'll just do two types. One will be fire and one will be electric. You can really name these whatever you want. It'll just depend on how exactly you want to implement. And we're only going to limit ourselves to 2 now, so we don't have to play with variables too much and do all that. But the system should be very open, where you just add new things here and then you can change them how you like it. Alright, so now we get to the actual meat and bones of this this little thing here. So let me just set myself up really quickly. So we're going to go back to our blueprints and components, and we have this debuff component now. So we're not going to need tick, so we can just delete that. We are going to need to implement our interface. So we'll go to class settings and we'll find the debuff interface. And then you'll see we have our new 3 functions here. So I'm going to implement special damage, and then slow, and then stun. Awesome. And then we're going to need some variables here. So we'll start with a float, and this will be called starting health. And then another float that's called starting move speed, and then another float called the current versions of all this. So current health, oops, sorry about that. Current health and current move speed. Move speed. And then we'll have another one which of type boolean, and this will be called stunned with a question mark. And then we can start putting these in categories. So the starting ones will be public. So we'll name these public. And I can just drag this into public, and then the current ones will be private, since they'll be kept within the component rather than like exposed publicly. And then so for both of these, what we're going to want to do is we're going to say instance editable and expose on spawn. And then lastly, the only thing we need to do is make our resistances. So we'll create a new variable, and we'll put it in resistances category. Resistances. And then this will be of type E_damage type. And we can just name it the same thing, resistance. So compile, save. And then we're going to need to change its type here to a map. So we're going to change this to a float. And essentially what this is going to do is, so we have a resistance type, and then we have a value associated with that type. So when you add more in the future, it's it would be wise to have, so we go to damage type here, and we add one called none. So that way, and this is a variable that we never use. So I'm going to delete this, and then so when we add a new one, it'll say none. But if I try to add another one, you'll see that it says cannot add a new key to the map while the key with the default value exists. So generally you would add one called fire, and then you can add another one, and it would go to that none value. So you can change it to electric, and that way you don't have to like constantly change the first one and then change it back in the future. So for fire, we're going to give it a value of 0.1, so very low resistance. And electric, we're going to do a 0.9, so very high resistance. So that means that we barely take any damage from electric, and we'll take a ton of damage from fire. When we actually implement this into an actor, you can have it so like certain actors have different values and stuff like that, but I'll just leave this in the actor component, so since we're only going to be really applying it to one actor for now. So to get actually implemented in the code side of things, so on begin play, we're going to do a little delay here, just a tiny delay, and this will come into play later. It's not really necessary while contained in here, but since we're going to be adding some event dispatchers and callbacks and stuff like that, adding this delay will allow that actor to get set up before this actor gets set up, so that way when we call the functions, the other actor will actually receive the messages. So what we're going to do is now we're just going to set all these values. So set current health to be the starting health, and then we're also going to set starting move speed to the current move speed, and we're going to set stunned to false. And I'm going to leave the gap here because we do need to add one more thing now. So we're going to add something called an event dispatcher. And if you type in bind event to these, what you can do is you can create these so that way when we call an event in this, it'll essentially call, like you can subscribe to this event, and whenever we call it here, then the actor on the other side will receive the message. So we're going to create some of these, and one of them is going to be called died. Another one's going to be called update health. Then we're going to have another one called stun, and another one called update speed. So died will not need any variables, but update health, we're going to feed it a %. And this is going to be for that health bar, so this is going to be called health %. And then stunned, we're going to have, let's see, stunned will do the boolean, stunned. And update speed, we're going to do new speed. So we're gonna add a new variable here, and then we're going to go new speed. And then you want to compile and save here, so that way it updates these. So when we first initialize our health, we're going to update the health, and it's going to 1 health %. So we can just take this and divide it by the max health or the starting health. And then when we update the move speed, we can just update speed. And we can do this, but it's not really necessary to update stunned. So I'm just going to delete that. Awesome. So this will be called, we'll comment this out and call it init for initialization. Now for special damage, we're going to take our current health and we're going to subtract from it. We're going to take the damage amount and subtract that from the resistance amount, and we'll plug that in, and we can set our current health here, kind of working through this backwards really quickly. So we're going to take our resistance and we're going to find, and we're going to find the damage type that's coming in. And now what we can do is we can multiply the damage amount times the resistance. So this will give us how much damage we're blocking, and then we're taking the raw value again and we're subtracting the block damage. And we're plugging it into current health. And then we're going to check if this is less than or equal to 0, which would mean that we're out of health and we died. So we can just say branch there. And what we can do here is we can do update health if it's false, if we are not dead. And similarly, we can take the starting health and divide the current health by it. And then if we do have less than that amount of health, then we can just call died. Perfect. So we'll comment this out too. This will be called damage event. Awesome. So now for the slow, what we're going to do is we're going to get the starting move speed, and we're going to multiply that by the slow %, multiplied by a float. If you wanted it to compound on, you could just take the current move speed. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the current move speed. So every time they get hit with something, it would constantly compound and detract this slow amount. And then we're going to call update speed. And the duration, we're going to use a retriggerable delay rather than a regular delay. And what this will do is essentially, if you use a regular delay here, it will, and something gets hit with this event, the slow projectile again, it will not, it will, if you use a regular delay, it will ignore the fact that it got triggered again. So a retriggerable delay will essentially reset the countdown to the initial time that it's fed in. And this will allow us to just like keep spamming and shooting at the target and applying the slow constantly. And once this is over, we're going to reset our move speed to the starting move speed. And we're going to call this update speed again. And just feed that in. And we'll comment all this out. And this will be called slow. Next we need to do the stun. So when we get the stun, we'll say set stunned to true. We'll call stunned. And we'll plug that in. And then likewise, we're going to do another retriggerable delay here. And then we're just going to reverse this. So we can just copy that, paste it, and set it to false. And then we can just comment this out. Done. Perfect. So that should be all for the event. Now we can get into actually implementing this. So I'll close out of that. And then we'll go over to our AI and we'll have it so our little guy who goes between all the points implements this. So the difference between, I don't know if you noticed, but if we go into Blueprint, you'll see there's an actor component and a scene component. So the difference between those two is that a scene component is something that is in the world, like one of the objects. And an actor component is just something that does not have like a physical representation, but has code behind it, like the floating pawn movement. And there's this like arrow to separate the two. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in our debuff component here, and you'll see that it gets added to the bottom part. And let's see here. So I'm going to put in some default values here. This is important. So we're going to do 100 for health, and starting move speed would be 1200. Because if we look at floating pawn movement, it's going to be 1200. And we'll take note that acceleration right here is 300. So we'll keep that in mind. And then we want to make sure our resistances are still there. Yep, that looks good. If you wanted to, this is where you would change it, so it'd be like actor specific. And then we need to actually get into implementing the code behind all this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our begin play function, and we're going to do a sequence. And we're going to need 3 pins for this. So the first one, we should actually, sorry, I've got to go back here. So on our default scene root, I'm going to do widget. And here we're going to do health bar. So you'll see that it's super huge. So I've already found a good scale for it. Obviously everyone's scene is going to be a little different. So you just wanted to make sure it looks a little proper. I'm just going to move this up so it's right above the thing. And one thing to note is that it is one directional. So you see from the opposite side it's invisible, but from this side it is visible. So to get around that, what we can do is, I don't think we've implemented anything with tick yet, so this will be the first thing we use tick for. We're going to take our widget, we're going to set world location, set world rotation, and then from our rotation we're going to do find look at rotation. Starting point is going to be get actor location, and ending point is going to be the actor location of the player. So we're going to copy this, paste it, and then we're going to change its target to be get player pawn. Perfect. So now we can test this out really quickly, and you'll see that no matter where I go, it's constantly rotating to me. Even if I'm above it, below it, everywhere we go, we can always see this health. Cool. So we can just comment this really quickly. We'll call this update rotation for HP. And now what we're going to need is we're going to need a reference to the actual widget underneath it. So we're going to say get widget object, I believe. Let me double check on that. Yes. So we're going to get widget object, and then we're going to cast to HP bar. I know I say you should always avoid casting, but I'd say the one exception is when you're using begin play to just get all the references at the beginning, and that's kind of like part of like the loading. Like if you see games loading, it's just like essentially setting up the world, and this is part of setting up the world, and we can cast while we're setting up the world. So we're going to promote this to a variable, and we're just going to call this HP bar. Awesome. So now we have then 0 is casting to our HP bar, and we'll separate these out just a little bit, give it some more space to work with. This next one's going to be a little bigger, so it's good to have some space to work with. And then 1 is empty, and we're going to implement that right now. So we're going to take our debuff component here, and we're going to do a bind event to die, to stun, to all of them. So I'm going to make it so it's a little cleaner here, and we'll line these up so we know the direction we should be working in. That looks kind of straight. It's good enough. And then we're going to do another bind event to stunned. And then we'll do another one. Bring this up, clean it up. Bind event to update health, and then another one for update speed. Awesome. So let's space these out. Stunned is going to be probably a little bit of a shorter one. The health bar is going to be a smaller one. I think the update speed is probably the biggest one. Oh no, I take that back. Stunned is a little bit bigger, and speed is also a little bit bigger. Alright. So died, it's going to be very, very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to do here custom event, and we're going to say death, and this is just going to be destroy actor. So that's when we run out of health. Stunned, we're going to do a custom event again. And then this will be called stunned. And then for this, we're going to need a branch. And for here, this is where we're going to add something new. We're going to have a new boolean, and this is going to be called can move. So if we are stunned, we're going to set can move to false. And if we're not stunned, stunned is false, then we're going to set can move to true. I know it's a little bit confusing, but you can set these up however you want, really, with the naming, so it's a little more readable to you, because working with blueprints, the most important thing is just making sure that when you're looking back at it, you can understand what it is exactly you're looking at, and you can save yourself a lot of time. So luckily, we're at a spot where movement tick is all condensed to one little function here. So what we can do here is we're going to set our branch right before we even do anything else. You'll see that these all relate to all the other specific movements. And so this is kind of like a choke point. And we're going to find that choke point, and we're just going to say if can move is true, if we can move, then do the stuff that allows us to move. But if can move is false, then do nothing, essentially. And also, if we're stunned, we want to make sure that we set our floating pawn movement velocity to 0, or set velocity to 0. So it just stops us right in our tracks, and we are stunned right away. And then, so we're going to space these out a little more here. So we got a little more room to work with. I'm going to clean this up, move this over. So update health, we're just going to do another custom event, and HP updated. And then we're going to take our HP bar, and then since we set it to that, we created that function right at the beginning, what we can do is we can just call that function. So update health, and it's just going to be called update health. And we've already created it in a way that divides the current health from the max health, so we can just plug that in directly. We don't need to do any fancy math or anything here. And we can just clean that up. And then update speed, we're going to do a custom event, and this is going to be called speed updated. So this is kind of where also you have some freedom to like rework things to the way you want it. So what we're going to do is, so new speed, it's, if we look at it, it has the max value of 1200, so whatever we divide by or multiply by a fraction, it would give us essentially multiplied by 1200. So what you can do is you can just set max speed of our floating pawn movement, and where you have some freedom is when it comes to the acceleration. So remember that the acceleration is like the force that it will constantly apply every time there's a movement tick to lerp to that point. And if we look at our acceleration, it is currently 300, and our max speed is 1200, so it's 1/4. So I'm just going to take this new speed and I'm going to multiply by a float, and I'm going to take 1/4, so 0.25 of it, and then set its acceleration to that. And just remember that when this component is first created, we do call the update speed. So this gets called right at the beginning, and also HP bar up gets called right at the beginning. So if we look at it now, you'll see that while the HP bar was 0 before, now it is 100% full. Awesome. So now we need to make it so that the component can actually receive these functions. Because you know that there's the interface that talks between it, but the interface is going to be calling on this actor. So essentially what we need to do is we need to forward over all of those interface messages. So likewise, we're going to add the movement interface here. So it's going to be called debuff interface. And all we're going to be doing, so we look at our functions here, I'm going to implement all of them. And I'm just going to forward these all over to our debuff component. So apply stun, and make sure it's the one that says message. And then apply slow, make sure it's the one that says message. It's weird how this one is that like a bug. I think that's a bug. I already have the code here, so we're just going to import this. Cool. And we'll see if the interface call one works here. Awesome. And then we need to actually make it so our projectiles implement this. So we're going to go back over to base projectile. And then we're going to, in between hit asteroid and destroy actor. So if you remember, we have the traces going on, and we're going to take this trace result, and then we're going to have a new function here. This is going to be called override hit. And this will take an input of hit actor, or sorry, actor reference. And this will be called hit actor. And we're just going to call this right in between these here, so override hit. And you'll see these names don't match up, so I'm going to compile, save, and then refresh here. And then it'll change properly, plug in that hit actor. And then all we're going to do now is we're going to make 3 new functions. One's going to be called apply special damage. One's going to be called apply slow. And a third one going to be called apply stun. Oops. Cool. And then for the special damage, we're going to feed it a float. And this is going to be called damage. Oh, sorry. They all need actors. And this is going to be called actor to apply, and we can just copy this name since they're all going to need this. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Perfect. And so for this, all we're going to do is just apply special damage. And it's going to be the message this time. And this one is going to be called apply slow. The message. And this one's going to be called apply stun. Awesome. And then we can promote all this to variables. So damage amount, we're going to call this special damage. This one is going to be called damage type, special damage type. This one is going to be called slow percent. We'll just name it the exact same thing. Duration, we're going to call it slow duration. And then stun, we're going to call it stun duration. So override hit. Now we're going to actually build up this functionality. So we're going to have another sequence here. And we're going to need 3 pins as well because we've got 3 functions. And then we can group all these into a little category here. We'll just call this special. And drag all these up. So just remember that we do already have a damage, and we are applying that damage. So since we're not using the default any damage event, the one that's built into Unreal, that this damage isn't really applicable. We're using special damage to apply to it. This is mainly for the asteroid. But if you wanted, you could have it so that this projectile does a special type of damage, and then you use the default Unreal damage for other actors if you wanted like a non-scaling form. And then for sequences, what we're going to do is we're going to do branch here. We're going to need 3 of these. And we're going to promote all these to a variable. And so the first one is going to be called applies special damage. The second one's going to be called applies slow. And the last one is going to be called applies stun. And we'll call this special abilities. And all we're going to do is we're going to take this hit actor and we're going to say on the first one, apply special damage. And you want to make sure it says BP based projectile. I know we named it the same thing. If you want it to be less confusing, you can change these to different names. But you just want to make sure it's getting fed that actor to apply to. So this one is slow, so we're going to say apply slow. And then we're also going to do stun. Alright, so we're nearing the end here. The only thing we need to do is make the actual different projectile types. So what we can do here is make a new child blueprint class, and this will be called BP fire projectile. And then we'll do another one called BP underscore electric projectile. And for the electric one, we're going to change its color to purple. So we'll take the blue emissive or just emissive material instance. This will be called M underscore purple emissive. And change its color to purple. And change its color to, so we're on the electric, and we're going to change its color to purple. Cool. And then what we can do here is all we need to do is change the class defaults. So special damage type will be electric. Special damage will do 20. Slow percent will do half. We'll slow down to 0.5%. Slow duration will do 5 seconds, and no stun. And then we need to, what we're going to do is we're going to set all these to false in the base projectile. So that way when we create our new children, you'll see that they're all set to false, and I can say that as the electric, it does apply special damage and it stuns. And then for the fire, what we're going to do is I'm going to go back to the fire projectile. We're going to change this to red emissive. And it'll have the exact same amount of damage. So 20. We'll set this to 20. Special damage type will be fire. slow percent will be none, slow duration none. Oh, sorry, yes. I think I messed that up. Yeah, so with electric, we are applying a stun. So this one will be 4-second stun, and then we can reset these, actually, because these aren't going to be used at all. And then the fire is the one that slows. So we'll do half, and then stun duration will be 50. And we want to make sure we say apply special damage and apply slow. And just confirm that they are set to the opposite types. Yep. Awesome. And then we need to actually make our little dude shoot it. So we're going to go back into our AI. We're going to find our follower. And I'm going to make a new projectile type here. And this one will be called fire projectile. And then we're going to make another one called electric projectile. Fire will be red. And electric will be purple. And then we're just going to plug all these back in. And we can just test these out one by one. So let me just reset up all these things. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this over to the fire now. So now when we shoot, our bullets should be red. Yep, which they are. And it seems like it's working. I'm trying to see why this guy isn't moving. Oh, did we set defaults? Starting move speed is set to 1200. That is true. And then we look back at debuff. Alright, sorry about the cut. So it seems like when we were setting things up, we mixed these around. So before it was set starting move speed, it needs to be set current move speed, and then starting move speed needs to be the get rather than current move speed. So just make sure it looks like this. This is in the debuff component, and then in aggro we need to make sure that we set can move to be true rather than false. So now when we push play, you'll see that he does move, and then I can remove the little debug message we have here, and let's delete all that. Perfect. So now we can shoot him. And this is from, since we're constantly applying slow, you want to add some like is valids here to each of them. And we'll add this back in. Show. And then if we, so that slowed him down, and then if we look over here and we go back to our follower and we change it to electric instead, and we shoot him, you'll see that he should stop in his tracks. And you see that he's a much higher resistance. He can take a really hefty beating with the electric. And that's about that. Awesome. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day, and take care.